think transparency is probably the key here. You've highlighted a really interesting point. We know that we've got the MiFID II regulations coming up which really look to address this, but do you have any views on how this will work in practical terms, Richard?
The upcoming MiFID II amendments, at least in part, are going to attempt to address this. There are two provisions which will probably be relevant. The first is sustainability risk. The second one is sustainability preferences. Sustainability risk is about clients understanding how the value of their portfolio is fluctuating in response to changing ESG risk factors. Sustainability preferences is about clients having the ability to specify their ESG preferences and have them taken into account as their investments are carried out. For firms, this is going to be operationally complicated. The processes, the taxonomies, the models, the data behind showing fluctuations in portfolio value and in terms of understanding and applying client preferences is going to take some work.
This ploy of greenwashing and adding in the term green at the start of any marketing materials is no longer going to wash. But when we look at preferences, presumably there must be like a profile of various grades of ESG, and on one end you've got an investment that is extremely green and ticks all the boxes from an environmental perspective, and it may be the same for S and G. But I think when you look at it across the board, it's difficult to pick apart the weightings, and it goes back to our point on the judge and jury. How do you cut that up? Do you have any views on the weightings?
I think what's important here is establishing a common language, a taxonomy, if you like, for talking about preferences and having those firms recognise those preferences in a formal way and apply them in a way which is consistent with the investment strategy that a portfolio is offering. Without this kind of standardisation, it's hard to see how those preferences can be, in practice, taken into account in investment strategies. Of course, we're in the investment industry, so we have to talk about indices. Indices at the moment are playing a really key role in ESG product development and product execution. How do you see some of the challenges in the world of index creation, and how will firms start to respond to that?
Indexes, certainly in the green sector, have always played an important part, but the construction of the actual index and who gets to judge the weighting, the importance, the factors is really complicated. The ratings agencies do a really good job of it, but when you look at some really well-known FTSE 100, S&P stocks, you can find for some very popular stocks held within green indices a very different view of their E, S and G impact and their rating. We recently did a study, and when we looked at various different indices providers, we noted that some would put them at, let's say, AAA rated, and others would have them down as a B, sort of a sub-investment grade from an ESG perspective. But it's the same company. Because they have different weightings, they have a different view. Getting to the bottom of a fair and reasonable representation of the environmental impact, the social impact, and the quality and the standards of their governance, and being able to then take that into an indices to create overall portfolios is absolutely fundamental, but we're not there yet.
Charles, to what extent might we see firms start to develop their own ESG indices and their own approaches to measuring ESG factors?
There's always been an element of an ESG team, a sustainability team, a CSR team, who've sat on the periphery of the investment committee, helping, giving advice, experts, PhDs, people who have a great deal of knowledge around the periphery. I think what we're finding now is the indices will always have a place to play. They will always be fundamental to stock selection, understanding the risks, especially as it brings in the financial metrics to mix in with the ESG factors. But I think what we're starting to see now is indeed proprietary indices creation privately within the firms themselves. 3/4 of fund managers believe that ESG factors are going to be fundamental to their portfolio construction going forwards. 5 years ago, it was less than 10%.
The next phase of ESG is about transparency. How do firms demonstrate to investors, to regulators, to themselves, that they're doing the things that they want to try and do? This is going to be complicated. It's going to touch all aspects of a firm: their data, their processes, their controls, their way of thinking. At the moment, firms just aren't set up to provide the transparency around ESG, and the next 2 to 3 years will be characterised by firms investing in this.